Welcome, people. We are back with We Mortal Coils. We are doing our best. That is what we are doing. We have a short episode for you today. Trevor has plans or whatever, so he has to leave. But that's
Yeah.
okay. We forgive him. All right. But it kind of worked out great because or I presented a topic. Um, to share a little bit with our audience. A lot of us aren't in a good spot. It seems like every friend that me or my partner have are all telling the same story. Like we're all just struggling. And I'm a teacher for those of you who don't know, and my students report the same thing, reporting that from their parents, among other things. And so, of course, whenever I was thinking of a topic for this episode, it didn't come out like the happiest one, all right? And so I started getting into a quite nihilist mood with, does intelligence even matter? And I want to talk about some key points, right? Because we have to figure out what that means. And I'll set them out now, and then we'll go around and survey some opinions. All right. So, does intelligence matter? What do we mean by matter? Trevor would be the first one to say, that's up to you. But here we're talking about survivability, like as in survivability on the individual level, but maybe even on the species level if we want to take the conversation there. I certainly would like to. And then secondly, modern survival. In other words, continuation of the first one. How are we doing in modern society? Common thread of conversation is usually things like, is modern society good for people? Return to monkey type of arguments, and I hate those kind of arguments. So I really do want to visit them. And then third, I really want to talk about, when does it become too much, and would we really want to be smarter than we already are? Okay. So Trevor is all the way to my left. So I'm going to call on him to give us some first opinions. All right, introduce yourself and, go from there.
All right. Well, audience, I'm Trevor. I've shaved my mustache recently, so you may not notice that, but it's me. Good to be back. We haven't done an episode in a minute.
Got him.
Yeah. And I got a cat. A question. So you preempted me because I was going to say exactly that. Intelligence in relationship to what? And then you said survivability, and that makes me think of a lot of things. But one thing that it really makes me think of is a conversation I think I shared with Michael a long time ago at a systems science, kind of a colloquium lecture series. There's only like 4 of us, but it was really insightful. And at one point we had a discussion on blue algae. If you remember this, Michael, you have a very good memory usually. There was this conversation that the lecturer, I forget his name, brought up. This notion that there are some things that develop into quite sophisticated levels of complexity in relationship to survival or evolution or whatever. But there's also blue algae. So there's this blue algae that feeds off of light, and that is what it does. And it's remained in essentially the same state. You can track it, I think, through, if I remember correctly, millions of years. So it's in relationship to that like relative position, or the realization that there are such things as intertwining and developing levels of complexity, almost like bending steel over and over again to like create a blade, like developing layer and layer and layer of complexity, that I, at least right now, am trying to equate with intelligence. And then there's something else where there are beings that are, I'm not going to use the word perfectly content, because I don't really think that's the way that reality is encountered from that point of view, if there is such a thing. But it does exist, these blue algae things that have done essentially the same thing for a very long time and have not changed. Now, I kind of want to flip all of this on its head, because I do think when we speak of intelligence, we speak of intelligence relative to other things. When I speak of like, I am intelligent, or Stefan, you are intelligent, or anything else, it's like, for example, Like if I were to say that Bray is very intelligent, that would be relative to what my notion is of the I don't know, average human person. It's somewhat similar in the way, at the very least, the way that I'm currently encountering it. It's very similar to IQ, like an intelligence quotient.
It
It's
was, I
measured
mean,
in
I
relative to
think
others, not
I think we
a
all have a good intuition about like what you're talking about, like that middle ground intelligence. You know what I mean?
really what I'm yes. What I'm trying to get at is that when we say something is something,
Hmm.
we're not just. It's not in a vacuum. It's relation to a many a myriad
It
of
has to
things.
be.
I can't be. It has to be. That's really kind of what I'm getting at. And I do think that that's actually really quite important, and this is the reason why I'm raising it. I think when we say like, well, I don't want to be intelligent, or I don't want to have X, well, it's relative to what you perhaps once were, perhaps to what you see around you, perhaps to many things. But it's not just you are intelligent or you're not. It's a measurement of what you see of reality relative to other things you see in reality. It's not just a something. It's not just a color. Uh, and even colors need other colors for you to realize they're a color. I mean, imagine, and I'll end with this. Please. Ah, I was going to say, imagine a piece of information like binary, ones and zeros, except it was always only ever a one. Just one. Like I'm trying to send you information. Like let's say I'm trying to send you data. But I only ever send you one. Or let's say like a being has only the experience of the number one instead of one and zero. Well, not only is there not such a thing as zero in that conceivable reality, there's not even a one. There's nothing to comprehend the notion of a thing in relationship to other things. Like imagine a single ball moving at 100 million miles a second through space. So it's the only thing in that entire universe. It's hard to give a notion as to what speed is, how fast this is going in relationship to what. And I think that's quite important when
In
we have
fact,
these
it's
conversations.
impossible. You
Yeah,
know,
exactly. That's really my point. When we speak of intelligence, we really have to get into what is the ecosystem around what we mean by intelligence, and that can vary very dramatically.
I agree. So, on this episode, I knew, of course, that we would talk a great deal about, and I love the last words you just said there, the ecosystem. And I have no doubt that we will hit upon the point that um, I definitely feel that we're in a time of anti-intellectualism, and I also feel like I have evidence for it. You know what I mean? I know we've talked about it before. But anyway, Michael, you're next on my left. I'd like to hear from you next.
So you're talking about survivability in multiple modes,
Hmm.
and um, what comes to mind immediately to me, I don't remember the proper name, but the sieve, the kind of idea that the reason why you don't have aliens visiting us, well, hold that thought, but the reason why
You're talking about
we
the
don't
great
have
filter
the great
idea,
filter,
and we've done
yeah,
an episode on that before.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
Fermi paradox. I love that one.
and so that one comes into mind. It's like,
Of
well,
course.
Hmm.
how much intelligence is required and what kinds of intelligence are required in order to get past whatever this mysterious filter state that seems to prevent these things in the first place. Getting off world or meeting other civilizations, theoretical as they are. Mm. So, I also want to touch on your idea of collective versus individual intelligence, and like
Mhm.
we well know that like there are differences between people on how quickly they grasp things or apply them, and we try to measure that in various ways. Um, it's also clear to me at the end of the day that we don't really have a great grasp of how that highly complex system kind of operates anyways. I get I get glimpses and pieces every once in a while of like this idea, this theory of a larger like kind of superstructure that humanity organizes itself across, in the same way that like ants individuate into soldiers or worker ants or queens or whatever. In the same way, we kind of like individuate ourselves into different areas of working class or influence in the world. And I think about that, and I don't really know where to go with it because most of the people I've seen talk about anything remotely close to that, I mean, it's just poo-pooing into the air. We don't really. I mean, maybe modernly we have like machine learning. You could start crunching numbers, but like we don't have a coherent way of apprehending the system that is like the superorganism of humanity, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, so like
Yes.
to quickly talk about that, like with a kind of personal experience, even from the last week, I'd like to visit a Trevor type of idea that we usually talk about the floor giving out of any given idea, that you hold sacred or whatever. And I knew exactly what you meant when you said yeah, and I didn't know what to do with that information. I didn't know where to go with that information. In fact, this episode could have been retitled "What are information hazards?" Like, you know what I mean? Like what information is hazardous to us, and of course there's another whole, topic that could be condensed from that and so on. But
Yeah.
real quick, in the last week, um, kind of the last nail in the coffin for me for a lot of trusted scientists that I've come to know a little bit through their content, um, has just kind of fallen out for me. Yeah, you know what I mean? And I'm just like, wow, I don't know what to do with that information. You know, to put names to them. By the way, I'm thoroughly convinced at this point that Richard Dawkins has gone off the path. Like he has lost the way,
Really?
and as well, uh, Sabine Hassenfelder or whatever her name is.
Oh yeah,
I bought
physics.
I
Yeah.
bought her old book, the Existential Physics. I love that book. I enjoy it to death. She is turning into a grift monster. I mean, like, it's like, why are we doing this? Why do you hate me? Type of thing. But Trevor, what were you gonna say?
Well, first off, I am out of the loop. I got to hear about these things. But also, I was going to just mention briefly, like touch on what Michael was saying about trying to grapple. First off, just like the topic overall is really interesting. This idea of a superorganism of humans and be
A
able to like,
eusocial structure.
yeah, a eusocial structure. That's a nice term for it. I can only worry that as soon as we're able to actually engage with it and interact with it in any meaningful sense, it'll metastasize and square itself into something even worse or something even greater than that, I suppose. Because as soon as
Yeah,
you're able to,
it'll metastasize into the mandate of heaven, and 30 million people will die,
uh,
and so on. Michael talks all the time about this, or not all the time, but last time we were together, about this notion of statecraft and like squeezing the potential out of a given population and so on. It holds a lot of water, and I hate it. I really do.
uh,
You know.
Speaking of the superorganism, though, it kind of reminds me a little bit of like economics, for example. Like anyone who's like really good at economics, that will find that they're actually not. You eventually find and realize that any of your predictions are actually not very good predictions. Like it's just really difficult to predict these things, and part of the reason why that is that has a lot to do with really with just stocks or anything. If everybody knows that a system works, like a particular way of doing something works, then they all do it, and then now the system attenuates to this now correction. So now this method, surefire thing to make money, is now like literally not gonna. You're gonna get in, but you get out at best. Like it's just like it corrects itself constantly. And the reason why I bring this up is I think it kind of connects to this whole point about superintelligence and all that. Um, Being able to engage with it, like trying to engage with like the perfect civilization, or engage with this idea of a like a the collective superconscious, or be able to look at humanity as a collective and be able to influence it at that collective level. I feel I think I wonder if things will sort of autocorrect as you have this mindset, like what this huge apparatus of humanity is and what it's doing. The way that you change the way you encounter it, the way you think about it, and the way you discuss this large organism will change the organism, and then it'll change further and then change further, and you'll never actually be able to truly engage with it in that sense. In the same way that you can't be a good economist. It's just not something that, and there's no such thing. There's like a bucket that's like good economists, and like nobody's in it, that kind of thing. At least not for very long.
It's funny you talk about it this way because literally yesterday I was on my way home from work and I was sitting there thinking about like kind of exactly what you're talking about, how because of our kind of position in the universe we live in, we find it really really hard to study really really small things or really really big things. We
Mm-hmm.
find it kind of difficult to examine things in deep time and in the deep future, and like we will never break away from this. It's integral to our experience and our existence.
Yeah. Michael, I'm curious what. Yeah, you look like you had a thought.
I'd like to hear from
Oh,
Bray soon, by
Oh
the way.
yeah, Bray's been silent as a
Yeah.
mouse.
Hey, yeah, so Bray, you're all the way to my right, and we're dying to know. I mean,
Dying to.
I know that you're probably going to talk most about that modern survivability aspect.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
No, you're absolutely correct. Hello everyone. Bray speaking. Does intelligence matter? Yeah, I am particularly interested in sort of how intelligence pertains to modern survivability, and moreover the sort of factors that exist in today's time that detract or distract, impede upon the pursuit of, I guess knowledge is really the word, or a higher intelligence. Um, matter of fact, there's a book. Um, there's always a book. Where is it? I don't know. I think it's in the living room. It's a book that was written in the middle of the last century called On Liberal Education. It's one of those things where some guy just decided to sit down and write about a topic at length. Which I guess is really all a book is, but I don't know. It's like one of those.
Right about
yeah.
something at length.
That's
But
absolutely most of them. That's why most books were written by aristocrats up until like 150 years ago.
Yeah,
Fair
people
point,
of
fair point.
leisure had the
Fair
only
point.
access to it.
But it's like one of those like this, like John Locke of civil government. It's like it's a little bit different than I don't know. Anyway, my point being is that I've been reading this, and it's talking a lot about sort of probably a lot of things that we would talk about in this topic. Unfortunately, I haven't finished it to be able to give a really good overview, but it does talk about sort of this idea of the intelligence of a species of people as a whole, or moreover a society, and sort of things that you would expect, and the importance of getting a liberal education, not in a political sense, but in a meaning like the broad, overarching,
A free exchange of information.
right?
Liberalism, yeah, an education that makes you a free person.
Yeah. And I personally just love discussions of particularly about freedom in regards to anything really. But I think if I remember correctly, there was a particular point in the book where the author sort of made this point about human beings, like uh, part of the niche of being a human is being able to recognize the self in a sort of way that, like, I think the analogy that was used was there's human beings exist in the middle of animals and angels, in that we are self-aware, or maybe however your flavor of this, like aware of our own situation or freedom, or ability to understand more than animals, but we are imperfect and incapable of like
Oh wow.
attaining of
Yeah.
like this sort of status of angels. So we're constantly like fluctuating between the two, trying to attain one while removing ourselves from another. And
Sure.
part of that is the pursuit of knowledge and in a higher intelligence. And so I think that, I mean, that's always going to be a part of the human condition. Um, but like I said, I'm very particularly concerned with a lot of things in modernity that seem to get in the way of what seems to be, as much as participating in artistic activities is a fundamentally human phenomenon, the pursuit of a higher intelligence.
I immediately attached myself to that point you just made about animals and angels there from like a psychological perspective of this notion that we now have expectation and like the ability to abstract and create notions of what was, what is, what's coming,
Mm-hmm.
what I am, what you are, what's she doing, where are we, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, like can a
Um,
gorilla put itself in between
it
a
might.
plant and an abstract of like the perfect gorilla?
Well, the
You
problem
know,
with
Okay, so like for
the
real,
problem with
real
that is
quick,
we don't know. We
we don't
physically
know.
can't know.
yeah, we
But
can't know,
uh,
but look, I love Bray's approach to this, and I'm telling you, I really believe we could sit down and talk because I've got extensive notes already. We could talk for 3 or 4 hours about all of what we said. So we're gonna have to condense a lot of thoughts, but um, I deeply appreciate, can a gorilla imagine itself between a plant and a like meta thing above it, and that says a lot about us, doesn't it? So I would like to point out a couple examples, right? So in religions, uh, more or less, but especially like this Judeo-Christian type of idea, angels are these paragons, right? They're these, things of how shall we say, dispassionate, you know, uh beings
They're
that
they're
give away
yeah.
God's
they're a
judgment.
lawful execution of functions of the
Exactly.
universe. So
I
there's
Exactly. They
especially
represent in like a meta way,
mhm.
or even a narrative way, like or a platonic way of
Mhm.
Mhm.
again dispensing God's whatever, whether it be his storm, his fire, or his justice. You know what I mean? Like all these meta concepts,
or his
and
mode.
yeah,
Yes. Hello, gorgeous.
something.
Very good.
There's an angel of this mode.
Yeah.
And
I'm yes.
what I was going to say is that you know, as well, I'd like to point out to call out to Gene Roddenberry's idea, where Vulcans were like his like what we could be type of idea, where they were like perfectly logical beings and whatnot, and then we turn to something like Blade Runner, where the android represents what we could become almost, and like that last scene where he's talking about his personal experiences as an android, like these beautiful metaphors and whatnot. And then I'll bring up one more. What about 40K, where Warhammer, when they literally describe their tyrannical uh 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 cyborg genetically engineered monsters as angels that keep them in line and defend them against abject threats in the universe. So you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It has this very dualism to it, and
Michael.
it's
Yeah.
very important.
I definitely I really like where we're going on this one. But Michael, I have to ask: do you have a stable definition for a psychopomp? Do you have one? Because I feel like
A
you would.
psychopomp is somebody that is a being that leads you through the underworld, through the
Yes.
action of going through the process of death.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course. Okay. Dante's Inferno.
So,
I. So
yeah,
that may not be the best.
Virgil.
Yeah, Virgil, of course, everyone's favorite
I've never heard the
friend.
word psychopomp, but I mean,
Yeah.
Oh, it's
I
a
do know
wonderful
Virgil.
world. Based on my vague understanding of Greek, it doesn't make any sense as to what it actually means. But
Ah.
Sure.
Well, the reason why I bring that up, it may not be so apt now, but I had this thought of so this relationship here between like the notion of oh, I've activated. You
I
gonna
don't
like
think
I can see
we
you.
can't see
I can
anything.
see and hear you.
okay, good. All right, it started flashing. So it's this notion between like the primal state. So I'm kind of getting Jungian here, but like the primal like primordial human state that Bray just equated with animals, and then like you speak of like 40K, Stefan. You speak of all of these different things, but I think one thing that I think we're really touching on here is this like pure. Maybe another word would be static, because uh, thing, this ideal state that also exists, that is this tension for humanity. You have like these two different things present at the same time. Falling once more into your primordial malaise, whether that be the urges of gluttony or sloth
Or
or
sex.
or lust. Yes,
You know?
that's exactly where I was going. all of these things, and then like you have some sort of ideal. And what's fun about this notion, this way of encountering reality, is you could apply it to a lot of things. For many people throughout the last 2,000 years, that ideal was Christ, becoming Christ-like. But for some, it was like an Übermensch, which is a complete other thing. But nevertheless, it was still the same relative position, the same keen eagle eyes looking in some sort of direction away from what was into what could be. And I think the relationship between these two tension states, like first off, the realization that there is such a thing as this tension between like the ideal up here and then like the primordial man down here, and then you sitting there in the center.
It's almost certainly an illusion that we've created, like on a societal level.
I mean, now you're doing the Tiber septum nonsense. You know, I mean, it's the same thing.
Yeah,
I mean, we all know it's an illusion. All right.
I know that
that there
what
is
I mean is that that tension between them doesn't have a cosmic source. It probably only comes from our ape brains. You know.
And I can tell you for sure there are certain schools of thought that integrate the two. There are certainly schools of thought that have successfully.
I would like to see how materialistic they are.
Well, the thing is,
you know,
I'm actually trying to propel like that notion, Michael. I'm trying to agree with Michael here. I think like as soon as we exist in like this postmodern, whatever you call it right now age, when like God and all this is like, when the typical notions of your monotheistic worldview have faded away and you're standing there, you realize it's like that trees become trees moment, where like first, when that first happens, when you realize that, in that typical old adage, if you could forgive me, Michael, that God is dead and all that kind of stuff. After that, the trees are no longer trees, the rivers are no longer rivers. Everything fades into this strange state of consciousness we've never been in before. This happens for a lot of people today. Like I was raised in this like one particular Christian worldview, and then one day you look up and the trees are no longer trees. Just the relative position of everything has now become fuzz. So after that, though, I think something really interesting happens that connects to this whole cosmic consciousness, if you want to call it that, or whatever else. You realize that the metaphysical worldview that you had existed in before, that faded away, and like now you start to think of things in terms of like ape brain. Like, I'm just an ape brain, it doesn't really matter. But then you realize, like, to a certain point, that I am actually not an ape brain existing within a strange thing, or like existing, and then here's the universe. I am a subset of the universe. I am itself a metaphysical constant, if you like to think of it that way. And in the same sense that, like Stefan, you mentioned something I think is really important. Like you say, like this is an illusion. You realize that everything is an illusion. When everything is an illusion, the word illusion no longer has a weight or is itself a construct. Everything becomes as infinitely meaningful or as meaningless as one chooses to propel.
If the word illusion loses its meaning and the meaning of illusion is lost, right? Are things truly an illusion? I don't think so.
It doesn't lose its meaning in so much as it loses its like fundamental like malefic sense.
Yes. I'm perfectly aware of the illusory nature of many things.
And it doesn't make them immaterial or invalid or whatever. It doesn't throw them out the window. But it does. It's this like ontological shift on how you actually like kind of consider things after that point.
It's no longer such an easy binary anymore. None of it is. I mean, it's still there. You can still use it.
That is a really good way to like encapsulate everything we've just said. Like this animal angel, binary is probably just simply doesn't exist.
I think, what I mean? But I do think it's the tension that exists within modern like humanity, modern man, for a lot of people. I mean, sure. I think that's what that is.
It reminds me, this is absolutely disgusting. Like I hate this mentality type of thing. I saw this post on Reddit. God only knows where I saw it. In some feed somewhere. But it was like, yeah, so this OnlyFans model, finally contributed to society and solved the Navier-Stokes equation or something like that. And I was like, oh God, that's like, I get where they're coming from, but that's the worst mentality to have about people. Like, people are really just doing their best. You know what I mean? But
I've
like
met middle managers that were worse at contributing to society than
right,
your
and
average OnlyFans model.
what I'm
That's very
yeah.
fair.
So like, Michael, have you seen the Fallout show? By the way, that just reminded
Not
me
at
of
all.
something. Okay, well, just real quick for anyone who's
I don't
interested,
watch TV.
that's fair and
Good on
fine.
you. Good on you.
But you know, I like stories and acting and whatnot, and you know, anyway, the
Well, that's a
Fallout
different
show
discussion.
was pretty great because it was like it showed what the result is when you have a society obsessed with having middle management as like a way of life. You know what I mean? And it
Yeah.
was so bad. But anyway, you guys get my point. Like, you know, you don't have to solve the Navier-Stokes equation to contribute to humanity. Like, please, come on. It would be really nice if you did.
Does it help with
And
our
solve
survival?
might not be the right word. You know what I mean? Like, especially when it comes to that abstract mathematics, it
Mhm.
might be understand the Navier-Stokes
Right.
equation and what it can
Develop a
describe
proof.
or whatever or say.
Mhm.
But anyway, long story
I
short, I'd really like to get back to what Bray was talking about. You know, I really would like to talk about modern survivability. That's kind of the idea behind my experiences these past few weeks. And something that I say all the time. All right, well, two things. All right, if you'll forgive me, Bray.
oh
One,
yeah.
I tell people all the time. I swear, persons are intelligent, but people are dumb as rocks. I swear. It's like whenever we have access to the information about how everyone else is voting or doing or understanding, we lose our minds, we lose our brains. And second thing I'll say
Hmm.
is that I continue to say that American culture rewards the wrongest people,
Mhm.
not just wrong people, the wrongest people. We make the stupidest people in our society the richest. I swear.
I have
You
a
know,
lot
and
to say about this that is not, I promise, specifically about economics.
and that's what I'm trying to say. Like, I really want to hear Bray talk about this stuff because I'm in the dumps. I'm totally in the dumps about this sort of thing, and I know a lot of people who agree with me and think the same way that we reward the wrongest people in this culture. Go ahead, Bray.
So, yeah, I do have a lot to say about this. I'm not just going to blurt it all out, but I will try to get through a little bit of it. One of the things I was thinking about as you were finishing the last little bit there, when you said people, persons are intelligent, but people are dumb. There's a saying I tell people all the time, especially when somebody will try to say that they're dumb, or even as people will accuse me that I'm calling them stupid or something like that, and I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like, and Stefan, I think you'll appreciate this the most out of everyone. I tell people, I'm like, look, everybody's a dumbass at
Yo,
something.
yo.
I'm just calling you a dumbass with regard to this particular thing. It's like you are woefully unintelligent with regard to this one thing, but I guarantee you, in the same turn, I don't know jack crap about something that you are, back of your hand intelligent about. Um, and then, of course, people being dumb, I think that speaks a lot about interpersonal relationships on a grand scale, and probably a lot to do with the way that our decision making is structured in society. But that's an entirely different conversation. I'm particularly interested in both um, modern features of society that I think are a detriment to the pursuit of intelligence. I obviously, if you can't tell, I think that intelligence matters. It's like I said earlier, a fundamental part of being a human being. Other than our ability to run really long distances without getting tired and fatigued,
Yeah. Which,
in
of
order
course,
to
those have to be interrelated at some level.
right.
And you know, I'm just trying to put that out there so that we don't, you know, talk about it too much.
Sure. The ability to think and reason and form a higher intelligence is probably the pinnacle of being what we all are.
It's our defining feature. And I would like to say for the audience, of course, the hyperbolic title "Does Intelligence Matter?" You know, it is clickbaity as shit, and that's what we're sticking with. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
And we want you to get on the show. We want your opinions. You know, comment below and whatnot. But I do think intelligence matters, but I'm trying to reinforce that idea. Go ahead, Ray.
I will say on this point, American culture rewarding the wrongest people in society. This will be my economic jab, because our economic system revolves around people who can generate the most wealth or accumulate the most capital, and therefore those people get rewarded the most by basically pursuing whatever means does that the best. And I literally have written off to the side, intelligence does not necessarily correlate to better life or more good necessarily. I mean,
I
you could.
remember just a few short years ago, Bray, being in the uh, ultra conservative alt right bubble, okay,
Mhm.
and truly having a belief that that is the case, that the richest people are the most intelligent by birth,
Right.
and it's just not true. It is simply incorrect. Now, do not misunderstand me. They have access to the most diversified food, for example. I mean, the most diversified shelter, the most blah 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 blah. And I feel like I want to hear from Michael on this. Michael, I really cherish your thoughts of late about like how certain dare I say like aristocratic like upper crust things kind of develop naturally. And I think that I disagree. I really do. I think that they can change. I think that they're quite arbitrary because we have lost many of our instincts. And so like
Instincts. Okay.
you see what I mean? Like
So
in other words, a very we've done away with a great deal of instinct in our evolutionary path, so to speak. But
Ooh.
anyway, I really want to hear Bray and Michael talk about this.
Yeah, I think as far as what I would have to say about that, I don't know, maybe I'm going in a different direction here, and also a really good opportunity to plug another book. I actually don't remember the name of
not
it.
too
It's
many
upstairs.
tangents. We have limited time.
Yeah, but it's more on the topic of, I think it's more on a Google centric. It was written several years ago, but about how the importance of retaining information, actually like yourself, than relying on basically like a Google search or something like that. And I think that's incredibly more pertinent now, because you can, there is a Google, so to speak, many different versions of them that you can just communicate with directly. You don't. There's no more Google like I have to type this in a certain way. You could literally just pull up Chat GPT and ask it anything, and it will probably give you what you're looking for. And I think that that can detract from people's incentive to learn anything for themselves. I mean, even just for example, like artificial intelligence has shaken up coding uh, across the board, because you can just tell a computer to write you a code for something and probably have to do minimal upkeep or
No,
sort of.
wrong.
Oh well,
But use a
It,
different example.
well,
give different example.
well,
Well, sure, sure.
actually,
I'm on the ground level there. I can tell you the code the CEOs want that to be the case.
Mm-hmm.
Any experience in your dev will tell you that the best these things can do is work at the two ends, but they miss the middle completely, which is getting a prototype up and running and then maintaining like small bug fixes.
Mm-hmm.
The in between, they're really awful at right now.
and that's where the bulk of the work is for someone like
It is.
yeah. So
Right.
that's, I see what you're saying.
I used to have a partner, Michael, that was deep in like coding, front end, back end, blah blah blah, and uh, I wouldn't I wouldn't correct Bray because I'm not qualified to. You know what I mean? So I'm just happy we have someone who is not a luddite,
No, yeah, I know.
on the podcast.
It was an easy example just because it was stuff that I used to do, but it's also like it's more of like a buzzy
Right.
type of thing to
Absolutely.
go to rather than something more more whatever. But
Mhm.
the point being simply that there are technologies today that make thinking easier, or at least are they don't make thinking necessarily easier, but they make they are a
Actualizing
different.
ideas.
There are different means to achieve the end that you achieve normally by
But a
thinking
counter
yourself.
argument to that, Bray, that I do hesitate to bring up, but you kind of have to, is that what if that's the next step? Like, for example, in Star Trek, I'm sure Trevor will appreciate this. In Star Trek, there's this like one random episode where this father looks down at like his like less than 10-year-old son and goes, "You have to go to calculus class. Everyone needs an understanding in calculus." And so what I'm trying to say is, like, if we are to push more and more abstract concepts to a lower and lower age to fit growing society, maybe this thing that will help us think is the next step.
Oh, like a
Mhm.
neural motivator
Sure.
is another thought that I've. Yeah, that's kind of an interesting side thing. Talking about brain-computer interfaces, that's also fun.
Well, to
Um,
my knowledge, in Star Trek, no one has a brain interface except for like a few
no,
people.
no, that would have been too
But
out
you get my
there.
point.
Yeah.
Like he can, like that child was able to access a computer since he was an infant, and he was able to use it. And like the logical thought there is that maybe we can do abstract learning far younger. And I've seen the data on that as a teacher, and it's probably not the case, but it's fun to think
Yes,
about.
it is fun to think about. This is one of those things where I think we're in a really weird space because I feel as if we're moving really quickly to accumulating more and more knowledge to such a degree that if you want to, this is tough. There are a lot of things moving around here, but the notion, like the intuition I get when we talk about this, is that as we accumulate more and more knowledge, it's going to take a lot more and more time to essentially train or teach the youth as further and further and further. I mean, it wasn't always that people went to college for things. Like where a sizable minority of people in the population went to get their bachelor's in engineering or anything else. Like we seem to need more and more information in order to become just middle class Americans in this sense. But at the same time, I'm not. It's hard to say where exactly that goes because part of me thinks like, well, what kind of jobs will be the bread and butter of the average person in the 22nd century? No idea. Um, how difficult will it be to harness information when you do need it? One thing I think I learned when I entered into an actual like career job is you could really truly know very little about how to do your job in the first week. Really, like your CV, how many bullet points are on there can sometimes be very can mean very little, and all that really matters is that you really want to figure it out. And due
That's
to
more
the
and more
access
relevant.
yeah, and access to the internet as well as AI models, they're not perfect in any sense of the imagination, but the ability to sort of scrape information more easily now using one of these things than ever before. Like I started playing with websites. I have no web design experience at all. I have no idea how to build a website. And then I built like a pretty okay website in a couple in like 2 days, like a site, like an actual workable thing. And like I'm a web designer now. Look at that. It took 2 days. And like literally, that's something that we're becoming more capable of due to the lifting of these AI models. It's a bit like how I'm capable. I know exactly the exact paths to take to reach the Statue of Liberty from where I am right here in the Bay Area in California. Like I have that ability. I can do that. Like I can find the shortest path to walk to get there. It's not a very short path, but I know the
But you
shortest
could
way.
at least figure out the one that would be the most efficient. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna, and from that angle, like I now have a considerably more satisfactory way of doing that due to AI.
I can hear Bray in my ear going, but now you don't have to ask people to help you. You know what I mean?
No. So yeah. So I was
Well,
just
I
thinking
do,
about
yeah,
that.
definitely worry about the pro-social
Yeah,
element of everything.
That's a
Well,
good point to
right.
make. Yeah.
That's part of it, and I didn't mention this earlier, but I've written on my sheet the modern spectacle, which is a little bit of a very particularly chosen word. That kind of goes into a larger discussion about isolation and sort of creating a
Kojima was right.
but what I really want to say is while you guys were talking about that, and I was thinking about the AI example that I brought up, I was like, well, an easier example that everybody here probably was hammered into as a kid growing up in school was a calculator.
Oh my God,
Uh,
yes.
and the fact that you're not always going to have that when
Bullshit,
you're out
Grandma.
in the real world, and you're going to have to know how to do this stuff yourself, and it's just not the case. But we still seem to recognize the value of being able to perform mathematics without a tool. But what I'm wondering is intelligence in the future going to be measured by your capability to use the tools that will acquire the means to your end, um, instead of just raw intelligence and like knowing things? Like if you had two people in a room and one of them was like one of those, like, what do they call, like, kids that are like super smart at a young age,
Prodigies or whatever the hell.
wonderkins or something like
Yeah,
That's
that.
another
Wonderkid,
word,
yeah.
sure.
He had one those on one end, like Harvard admitted at 4 years old and 3 degrees by whatever, and all this stuff, like just super knowledgeable person. But then you have another person who's like the world's best person at using every possible tool, like AI model, or to basically like an intermediary tool between actually knowing that information. They got like 1,200 tabs open at one time, and they're like
Yeah.
Sure.
half of them are YouTube tutorials and everything like
Yeah,
that. It's like,
it's just an optimizing machine. Like everyone's
right.
trying to, it's like one of those like strategy board games where everyone's trying to get the most victory points at the end, and everyone optimizes a certain strategy in order to attain such, and like everyone does it in very, very, very different ways. Everyone
Mhm.
looks quite different, but we're all trying to optimize. Essentially, we're all just
Yeah,
running around
so
optimizing things.
I want to pick out two parts to the
Yeah,
types of
cool.
intelligence that you're referring to here. You're referring to the ability to remember things, which is one like aspect that's like crystalline, and then you're also talking about the ability
Picking up skill.
take things around you and then manipulate them readily. And so raw intelligence measures both. So IQ actually measures both of those things. But more to the point, I guess, yes, the person who is able to use personal knowledge management to manipulate an array of tools will have and continue to have a much greater advantage over someone who specializes in turning themselves into a tool for a specialized purpose up until a point. And that point is, what is the maximum throughput that the tools are capable of being used for?
Mm-hmm.
At which, after that point, you need the human being who's dedicated his 30 years of his life to this.
Yes.
And what I worry
Yes.
about with regard to that is that eventually the tools will.
You're talking about post skill.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we're talking about post-truth.
what
What about
We're talking
post-skill?
about post skill
look,
scarcity.
There's a
event.
great example for this. Maybe what I'm
There's
saying
a Star
is
Trek episode for it.
there probably
Almost
is.
certainly.
There might be several.
I've seen it.
but
Wait, which one? Now I have to know.
I don't remember. I've seen like 6 Star Trek episodes in my entire life. But
Well,
one
Michael,
where they.
what I was really trying to say, and I should have chosen my words
Oh,
better,
I
is
want to
that
hear
there are
what Michael.
several.
I want to hear what Michael was going to say. Michael, what was it?
But they found this ship full of people who were escaping a planet or something, and it turns out they were in a post-skill society. So these children would imagine, wooden constructs, and then it would create the machine would just materialize a wooden.
Yeah, they were in
horse.
this utopia world, and they were all complete idiots. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Stefan, I interrupted. I'm sorry. What were
Oh
you saying?
no, you're totally fine. Say that again though. That they were total idiots because
Their society was optimized. Everything was optimized around
and that's
them.
what Trey is trying to bring up
I
here.
want to connect that with the upper crust at some point in this.
yeah,
Right.
I mean, like I don't want the tools to become so idolized that the machine becomes the pinnacle of what it means to be human instead of being human. They made a great movie about this called Interstellar, where we go
Bring
on
that
this
up every episode.
giant quest, and it turns out that the robots actually can't perform the quest, and they needed the human being to go because the robots just didn't have the guts They didn't have the human
They
touch
didn't have
that
the
was required.
soul,
Yeah.
yeah.
You know,
I
those
wanna
kinds of stories kind of strike me as hollow at a certain point because it's like, oh,
Right.
well, the human spirit, but we have really cool robots, but the human spirit. And it's like, okay, is this cope?
Yeah,
this
I mean a
cope?
little bit.
Yeah.
It's like you
mean,
like that one scene where they have that giant ocean planet. Like you really
Mhm.
could have sent a drone down there. I do not know why you had to send like in a feasible real world. I don't see any meaningful reason why you wouldn't have many different drone pods attached to the side of your ship to send down to those sort of weird uh, temporal oddity situations. Like the idea of sending someone down there to spend 20 years in 5 minutes, it was kind of strange. Anyway,
There have to be places so hazardous, that we
So-
refuse to go.
Mhm.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
So I want to tie these ideas of post skill scarcity and like, why do we make tools? Why do we seek after power? Why do we seek after material resources in the world? It's so that we can do things, right? It's so
Change
that we
our
can
situation.
actualize our ideas and change reality. The people who are recently wealthy are really damn good at that. And they're actually quite intelligent. Even if they say stupid things and they do stupid things, like we said earlier, not everybody's good at everything. But what they optimized for is attainment of resources and the ability to actualize things in the world, which is why Bezos, and yes, he did start from like less than zero. I mean, way more than zero. Quite put that caveat right there because that's very true. But
I'll say it this way
he's
for you,
running his
Michael.
own
His
space
basic needs
station.
were met, at
Yeah,
least.
his basic needs were quite met, but he's also going beyond. So there's kind of like two types of people when it comes to having the resources. It's people who consistently try to aim for more, they're aiming for the top. And then there are people who are saying, let me look from the top down and say what's just good enough and reach for that. And
Yes.
this is kind of a dynamic I've noticed in my own life because I'm one of these people, and most people are probably just good enough. And that's fine. That's how
You
it
say that,
crumbles.
Michael, but I would caution you against that unless you've seen evidence about it. For example, most, if not all people, believe that they are more intelligent than the average person, and most are not.
Well, yeah, if we all were, yeah, it's kind of a
Right.
funny thought. But I definitely see where
Well,
Stefan
I
is
have a
going.
metric for that, but that's not gonna. That's just like I don't like pulling that out.
Oh.
So, anyways, but
Right. Think about how dumb the average person is, and then
well, I'm
consider the fact that
2.75
That you're
standard
an average
deviations above the
person.
mean. So
Consider the
that's
fact
just
that
like
Michael
half of
took an
everyone else
IQ
is dumber.
test. Oh.
I was tested as a child.
Oh.
So, anyways,
I have to say that is not good information to have.
it's
Yeah.
not. Well,
No.
but it was an interesting period of my life, kind of getting over it. But
You-
it's relevant if you want to pop that out.
Sure, but I do think, like Michael, for your own like psychological sake, I think having access to that information doesn't
It's
serve.
definitely an info hazard.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
because like it helps. It can alienate you from other people very
You can
easily.
use it as a cope to sustain your own alienation.
It's the
your
same.
own auto
Well, that part
alienation.
hurting
Yeah.
yourself, but it also. If you're not careful, and Michael, I don't accuse you of this because you're a very empathetic person. Like I know you. Like I know you.
Yeah.
I've known you far before this podcast.
No, but
and
I
you're-
understand.
you have been for me like an empathetic person. Like when I have said if I have ever I've done this before where I've said something and you've brought me to the fore of, well, think of people, think of normal people. Like you've brought me to an empathetic position. You have. So it's from that place that I say you need to be very wary of this piece of information because it can allow you very easily, if you're not careful, if you're not very hazardous, this info hazard as we call them, it could allow you to alienate and hurt and destroy others strictly for the sake of essentially a quantitative measure that was done in this one instance. It's quite arbitrary.
An arbitrary quantitative measure. It's like a pretty
I-
okay
I'm-
model, but not the greatest model in the world.
I really, really appreciate that we're talking about this stuff because I cannot tell you guys how much I've had to counsel students on this who truly, like, they know the buzzwords. They might even know the vocabulary words that we're talking about. But like to talk about, one of the better ones, Richard Feynman, like knowing the kind of ontological thing about this subject doesn't make you any more any better at understanding how it actually works.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so, long story short, my students, and this is kind of where I'd like to end because I know Trevor has to go. Um, Maybe we could pick this topic up
Hmm.
again,
Okay.
because we all seem to really appreciate it and really like it. And by the way, maybe we should pick it up again because maybe I and others will be in a better place. By then we'll be able to talk about it more positively. But look,
Yeah.
to
Sure.
kind of wrap us up, all right, to the audience, to you guys, to share what I was just saying. I've had to counsel so many students on this because of a few factors. One, most of them don't understand what like an IQ test actually means. They don't understand what their ACT scores actually mean. They don't understand what their SAT scores actually mean, etc. All right. I know that IQ tests and standardized tests are not necessarily the same, but they more or less test the same, like Michael said, the ability to crystallize memory and the ability to pick up new skills. That the fluid intelligence aspect to IQ and ACT scores or standardized tests is all there. Number two, they have a fundamental misunderstanding of genetics, and most people do. All right. And so, as a science communicator, someone who is paid by the community to be a science communicator, someone who is, qualified to talk on this and so on, I can tell you, the audience, and so on, that there are competing theories about intelligence. Some of them hold more water than others. You need to go find those and figure them out for yourself, more or less. None of us on the panel here are psychologists, so we're not qualified to talk about those competing theories to a great degree. But I can tell you that, as a student of psychology, there's like a theory about multiple intelligences. There's theories about how we put together schema in the brain and so on. Blah 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 blah. Go find those for yourself. Expose yourself to these topics. Okay.
Hmm.
And then two, genetics. So many students. I'm not going to say especially in this region because I don't have the data on that, but I have a hunch, I have a suspicion, an unfounded rumor a type of deal that because of our culture and because of what I said earlier, when just a few short years ago, whenever I was in that alt right kind of information bubble, that it's a very very common kind of idea you hear, or a myth, I would even say, that the richest people are the most intelligent. It's simply not true. Okay. Michael didn't get a chance to talk about it, but I know he was probably going to talk about old money. He talked about new money, but what about old money? Those people are stupid. I
Yes.
swear to God.
That's what I
I,
was gonna get at. Yeah.
Hmm.
exactly, and they know literally zero things except for how to maintain and establish a network. Like that's what they're
Sometimes.
born and bred to do, and raised from an early age to do, is maintain
Hmm.
and establish, charismatic networks. And by the way, that's not a bad thing, but I wish that in a more utilitarian or utopian society, those people were put on more productive things than, as Bray would say, raising capital for literally no reason than to just look at it
Hmm.
and not put it to any use, like, I don't know, solving hunger in this country, which could
Hmm.
just be done. All right. And so, anyway, back to the original point. A lot of people, in fact, most people, have a fundamental misunderstanding about genetics. All right. And so many students of mine, I feel, because of this kind of bubble that I talk about, believe that you are born with like an intelligence factor, and that's what you have, and that's it. They know nothing about neuroplasticity, usually, and they know nothing about genetics. They think that, because you were born with certain genes, that you're going to turn out to be this intelligent. And I always challenge that idea with this. If you really believe that, let me challenge it for you. What if you were starved? Just think about it that way. If you were predisposed genetically to be the next Einstein, but you were denied food as a child and you were stunted in your growth, there's no way you're going to turn out to be the next Einstein. Not just because of economic difficulties, like Bray would say, but because of biological ones. You literally don't have the right, framework to be that next person or next Einstein, so to speak. And I always tell people this as well. Like scientists like Einstein and Newton and people, maybe not Newton, he was kind of egotistical, but would be the first people to tell you that, like, our understanding belongs to everybody, you know,
Mm.
and
Also,
and so on and on.
Trevor's got to
Yeah.
Trevor's got to
I'm
run.
afraid I got to fly. But
Yeah. So y'all be good. I've really enjoyed this meeting. I really
we
thank
should
y'all
do
for
a
it.
part 2.
Yeah, we really should do.
We
part
really
two.
should. Yeah. All right. See ya.
All right. Have a good one.